I stood alone in the rain as mud covered Leo's coffin. I thought the storm stopped my family, but 20 miles away, they were popping champagne. They were toasting the $1.1 million settlement they planned to steal for a dream home. They think grief makes me weak. They forget that taking a mother's reason to live leaves her with nothing to lose. Today, I use their own greed to bury them beside the hole they dug for me. My name is Freya Norwood, and on the darkest Tuesday of my life, I stood alone in the freezing mud of Stonehaven Cemetery. The New England winter had decided to arrive early, bringing with it a violent nor'easter that whipped the bare trees into a frenzy and turned the ground beneath my boots into a slurry of ice and earth. The wind howled like a wounded animal, a sound that felt entirely appropriate given that I was about to bury my heart. I held the urn against my chest. It was terrifyingly light. That was the first thing that broke me all over again, the physics of it. How could 7 years of laughter, of sticky hands, of late-night story times, and the agonizing 4 years of fighting a congenital heart defect be reduced to something that weighed less than a bag of sugar? Leo was gone. My little boy was gone. And the weight of the ceramic jar in my numb arms was an insult to the sheer magnitude of the space he used to occupy in the world. The priest was a kind man, but I could see him shivering beneath his vestments. He cast quick, anxious glances toward the parking lot, likely wondering if anyone else was coming. There were 3 rows of folding chairs set up on the sodden artificial turf covering the gravesite. All of them were empty. Rainwater pooled in the seats, creating little mirrors that reflected the charcoal gray sky. I texted them twice. I had emailed the directions. I had called my mother, Lenora, the night before, and she had sobbed into the receiver, telling me how devastated she was, how she did not know if she had the strength to see her grandson put into the ground. "We will be there, Freya," she had promised. "We are a family. We mourn together." I checked my watch. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The service should have started 15 minutes ago. "Ms. Norwood," the priest asked gently, his voice barely audible over the drumming of the sleet on his umbrella. "Shall we give them a few more minutes? The roads are treacherous." "Yes," I said, my voice cracking. "Please, just 5 more minutes. The storm. It must be the storm." I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. My fingers were stiff and white, clumsy as I unlocked the screen. No texts, no missed calls. The silence from my family was louder than the gale tearing through the graveyard. I imagined them on the highway, perhaps stuck in a snowbank. My father, Arthur, cursing the traffic. My mother clutching her chest in anxiety. My sister Bianca trying to calm them down. I imagined them desperate to get here to hold me. I needed to know where they were. I needed to know they were safe. My father had insisted we all install a family tracking app 3 years ago. He called it a safety measure, a way to keep the family connected. But we all knew it was just another tendril of his need for control. He liked to know where we were, to ensure we were not embarrassing the Norwood name. I opened the app, my thumb hovering over the map interface. The blue dot representing me pulsed lonely and solitary in the middle of the cemetery. I zoomed out, scanning the highway leading to Stonehaven. I expected to see their icons clustered together in a line of red traffic on the interstate, but the interstate was clear. My breath hitched in my throat. Freezing there. I swiped across the map, widening the search radius. I found them. They were not stuck in traffic. They were not battling the elements to get to me. They were not even moving. The 3 icons, Dad, Mom, and Bianca, were clustered together, perfectly stationary. They were about 20 miles away, in the opposite direction of the traffic flow. I stared at the location tag, blinking rain out of my eyelashes, sure that I was misreading it. The Gilded Oaks. I knew the name. Everyone in our county knew the name. It was a brand new, ultra-luxury gated community that had just started its exclusive open house viewings this week. It was a place of marble foyers, heated driveways, and wine cellars deeper than my apartment. I tapped on the icon for my father. The status read, "At this location for 3 hours. 3 hours. They had been there since 11 in the morning. They had been touring real estate while I was dressing my son's urn in the velvet bag he would rest in forever. They were walking through walk-in closets while I was driving the hearse alone because I could not afford a limousine. A vibration buzzed in my hand, startling me. For a split second, a foolish, desperate part of my brain thought it was an apology text. Maybe they had been kidnapped. Maybe there was a mistake. It was a notification from Instagram. Bianca had blocked me on her main account years ago because my life was too depressing for her carefully curated aesthetic, but she had forgotten I knew about her secondary account, the one she used for close friends and private bragging. The notification read, "Bianca B. just posted a photo." My hand shook, not from the cold, but from a sudden, sickening drop in my blood pressure. I opened the notification. The image loaded slowly over the poor cemetery signal. It was a high-angle shot, beautifully lit by the warm glow of a gas fireplace. In the foreground, 3 crystal glasses filled with amber liquid were raised in a toast. In the background, out of focus, but unmistakable, was the expansive, snowy view from a massive floor-to-ceiling window, the signature view of the Gilded Oaks model home. And the caption hit me harder than the freezing rain. "New beginnings await, finally getting what we deserve. Dream home blessings." The phone slipped slightly in my grip. I stared at the words, "New beginnings." My son was dead, my 7-year-old boy, who loved dinosaurs and the color yellow, was currently ash in a jar in my arms, and they were celebrating a new beginning. Then, the math clicked into place. It was a cold, hard equation that cut through my grief like a scalpel. 1 week ago, the medical device company responsible for the malfunction that stopped Leo's heart had settled out of court to avoid a public relations nightmare. The check was for $1.1 million. They knew about the settlement. I had told them because I wanted to set up a foundation in Leo's name, to help other children with heart defects. I remembered the look in Bianca's eyes when I mentioned the number. I remembered my mother asking if I really needed all of it for charity. They did not see a tragedy. They saw a payday. They assumed I was broken. They assumed that Freya, the quiet one, the disappointment, the one who restored old books and lived in a rental apartment, would be too catatonic with grief to notice if she was manipulated into signing a few papers. They assumed I would hand over the burden of the money to them, so they could take care of me. They were at the Gilded Oaks, because they had already spent the money in their heads. They skipped the funeral because it was too depressing, too messy. And honestly, why waste a perfectly good afternoon of shopping when the check was practically in the mail? The wind howled again, tearing at my coat, but I no longer felt the cold. A strange, numb heat was spreading from the center of my chest, pushing out the sorrow and replacing it with something harder, something permanent. I looked at the priest, who was watching me with pity in his eyes. He thought I was weeping. He thought I was a destroyed mother. "Ms. Norwood," he whispered, "are they coming?" I looked down at the screen of my phone one last time. I did not hit the call button. I did not scream. I did not send a furious text message demanding to know why they were drinking aged scotch while I buried my child. Instead, I took a screenshot of the GPS location showing them at the luxury estate. Then, I took a screenshot of Bianca's Instagram post. I saved them both to a secure cloud folder. I looked up at the priest, my face dry despite the rain. "No, Father," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor that had been there just moments ago. "No one is coming. Let us begin." As he began to recite the prayers, reciting the words about ashes to ashes and dust to dust, I made a vow to the gray sky. They wanted the money Leo had paid for with his life. They wanted to build their dream house on his grave. I tightened my grip on the urn. I would not let them have a single cent. I would not let them have a moment of peace. The grief was still there, a black ocean threatening to drown me. But now, I had a raft. I had a purpose. I was no longer just a grieving mother. I was a witness. And as the first shovel of wet earth hit the lid of the vault, I knew one thing for certain. The family waiting for me at the Gilded Oaks had no idea that they had just created their own worst enemy. The silence in my apartment was heavy. a physical weight that pressed against my eardrums the moment I closed the peeling white door behind me. This place, a two-bedroom walk-up in a neighborhood that real estate agents politely described as up and coming, had been my fortress for the last 4 years. It was not beautiful. The radiator clanked like a dying engine. The carpet was worn thin in the hallway, and the view from the living room was a brick wall. But every dime I saved on rent here had gone into the Leo Fund, a mental ledger of copays, specialized nutrition, and the endless stream of medical bills that insurance companies deemed experimental or out of network. I walked into the kitchen and placed my keys on the counter, right next to a stack of unopened condolence cards. My eyes drifted to the corner of the living room where Leo's medical equipment used to be: the oxygen concentrator, the pulse oximeter, the specialized chair. They are gone now, donated to a clinic 2 days ago. All that remained were the indentations in the cheap rug. 4 small circles marking where my son had fought for every breath while I read him stories about knights and dragons. I sat down at my small kitchen table, the wood scarred from years of late-night work. I am a book restorer. It is a quiet, surgical profession. I spend my days hunched over manuscripts from the 18th century, using tweezers and wheat paste to repair tears that are older than my country. It requires patience, steady hands, and a reverence for the past. It does not pay well. My family made sure to remind me of that at every holiday gathering. "Still playing with old paper, Freya?" my father would ask, usually while pouring a second glass of expensive scotch. Imagine what you could do if you applied that focus to something real, like sales. To the Norwood family, value was only real if it could be driven, worn, or lived in. I was an anomaly. I was the scapegoat, the designated pragmatic one, the one born to absorb the shocks of reality so the others could float above them. And Bianca was the golden child. I thought about the $1.1 million currently sitting in a holding account. That money was not a windfall. It was blood money. It was the calculated actuarial value of a defective heart valve manufactured by a company that had cut corners on quality control. When the settlement offer came through, I vomited. I did not want their money. I wanted the device to have worked. I wanted Leo to be sitting here asking for juice. But when I signed the papers, I had a plan. I was going to launch a foundation. I wanted to fund research for pediatric cardiology, so no other mother would have to stand in the rain holding a ceramic jar. But my family saw math differently. To Arthur, Lenora, and Bianca, Leo's death was an unfortunate event that had miraculously yielded a high return on investment. I could see the logic unfolding in their minds like a business plan. Freya is used to living on nothing. Freya is humble. Freya does not need $1 million. But Bianca needs it. My sister was 30 years old and had never held a job for longer than 6 months. Her current title was lifestyle coach, a career that mostly involved posting inspirational quotes over photos of herself drinking lattes that my parents paid for. She lived in a condo my father subsidized, drove a leased SUV my mother paid the insurance on, and constantly complained about the stress of building her brand. I unlocked my phone again, looking at the screenshot of the GPS location, the Gilded Oaks. Of course, Bianca had been talking about that development for months. She claimed she needed a content house, a space with perfect lighting and a chef's kitchen to film her wellness journey. She had pitched it to our parents as a business investment. They had likely told her they couldn't afford it until Leo died, until my son's heart stopped. And suddenly, the liquidity required for Bianca's dream studio became available. The rage that rose in my throat was different from the grief. Grief was cold and watery. This was hot and metallic. I realized then that I had been trained for this, my entire life. I had been groomed to yield. When we were children, if Bianca broke a toy, I had to give her mine to stop her crying. When I got a scholarship to a university 3 states away, my mother guilted me into staying local to help around the house. While they paid full tuition for Bianca to party at a private college she eventually dropped out of, I was the organ donor for their egos. I gave pieces of myself my time, my dreams, my money so they could feel whole, And now, they wanted the final piece. They wanted to harvest the tragedy of my son's death to feed Bianca's vanity. My phone buzzed against the table, vibrating so hard it rattled the salt shaker. It was a text from my mother. Mom, Freya. Honey, please answer us. We are so worried. You were not at the cemetery when we arrived. We waited for an hour. I stared at the lie. It was breathtaking in its audacity. They waited for an hour. The GPS showed they were looking at crown molding 20 miles away. Another buzz. Mom. I know you are spiraling. This is just like that time in college when you got overwhelmed. Are you taking the sedatives Dr. Evans prescribed? Please tell me you are taking your meds. I narrowed my eyes. I did not have a prescription from Dr. Evans. I had never seen Dr. Evans. I was not on sedatives. I was grieving, not mentally unstable. Then another text. This time from my father. Dad, Freya. Listen to your mother. Do not do anything rash. We are coming over to check on you. We just want to make sure you are safe. You are not thinking clearly right now. I sat back, the air in the kitchen suddenly feeling very thin. I understood what they were doing. This was not a concern. This was the construction of a narrative. They were creating a digital paper trail. If they could paint me as unstable, as a grieving mother who had lost her grip on reality, who was spiraling and off her meds, then they could challenge my competency. They could petition a court to appoint a conservator to manage my assets specifically. The settlement money. They were gaslighting me via text message, creating evidence for a judge they planned to meet in the future. Look, Your Honor, they would say, we tried to help her. She was delusional. She missed her own son's funeral because she was hallucinating. We had to step in to protect the money for her own good. I looked around my shabby apartment. They saw a woman who fixed old broken things and lived in poverty. They saw a victim. They saw a checkbook. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the block button, but I stopped. No, that is what a victim would do. A victim hides. A victim runs away. I was not going to block them. I was going to let them dig. Every text they sent, every lie they typed, every fake expression of concern was another shovel of dirt they were removing from their own graves. I stood up and walked to the sink, splashing cold water on my face. The water smelled of chlorine and rust. I dried my face with a rough towel and looked at myself in the small mirror hanging above the sink. My eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, but the shaking in my hands had stopped. I needed to clean the apartment, not for them, but for the performance, if they were coming to stage an intervention. I needed to set the stage. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing a clean house. I would leave the condolence cards unopened. I would leave the blanket on the couch where I had slept for 3 nights. I would let them see exactly what they wanted to see: a broken woman. Because a broken woman is predictable. A broken woman is easy to rob. And as long as they thought I was broken, they would never see the blade coming until it was already between their ribs. I walked back to the table and looked at the picture of Leo I kept in a silver frame. He was smiling, missing a front tooth, wearing a superhero cape. Don't worry, baby, I whispered to the silence. Mommy isn't crazy. Mommy is just getting started. I put the phone down and watched the screen light up again. Bianca, Freya. Seriously, pick up. We are family. We just want what is best for you. I let it ring. The sound was the opening bell of a war they did not even know they had declared. The sound of a key turning in the lock at 7 a.m. is a specific kind of violation. It was not the tentative scratching of a landlord or the heavy pounding of the police. It was the smooth, entitled slide of metal against metal that I had not heard in 2 years. My parents had a spare key for emergencies, a relic from when I first moved in, and they insisted on having access in case I choked on a pretzel or whatever disaster they imagined I was incapable of handling alone. I was sitting on the floor of the living room, sorting through a pile of Leo's socks that I could not bring myself to throw away. When the door swung open, the hallway light sliced through the dimness of my apartment like a searchlight. They did not knock. They never knocked. My mother, Lenora, led the charge. She was dressed in immaculate morning black, a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my car, and oversized sunglasses that she removed with a theatrical flourish as she stepped over the threshold. Behind her came my father, Arthur, clutching his leather briefcase like a shield, and bringing up the rear was Bianca. My sister was wearing a tracksuit that looked comfortable, but was actually designer streetwear. She had her phone in her hand, holding it casually against her chest, the camera lens facing outward. "Oh, Freya," my mother exhaled, the sound trembling with rehearsed vibrato. She rushed toward me, ignoring the fact that I flinched. "Oh, my poor, broken girl. Look at this place." She was not looking at me. She was looking at the stack of unwashed dishes in the sink, visible through the open kitchen archway. She was looking at the blanket on the couch and the pile of socks on the floor. Bianca moved silently to the left, panning her body and her phone across the room. I saw the tiny red dot on her screen. She was recording. She was capturing the chaotic ecosystem of my grief to use as B-roll footage for whatever narrative they were constructing. Freya Norwood, the descent into madness. "Get out," I said. My voice was raspy from days of silence. "We were so worried," my father said, his voice booming in the small space. He kicked the door shut behind him, sealing us in. The air suddenly felt very thin. "You did not answer your phone yesterday. We thought you might have done something drastic." I stood up, clutching a pair of tiny dinosaur-patterned socks in my fist. "I was at the funeral," I said, staring directly at my mother. "I was burying my son. Where were you?" The room went deadly quiet for a heartbeat. This was the moment. This was where they would apologize. This was where they would admit the snow stopped them. Instead, my mother's face twisted into a mask of pity so profound it looked painful. She reached out and touched my cheek with a gloved hand. "Oh, honey," she whispered. "You do not remember. Do you?" I frowned, pulling back. "Remember what?" "You were not there, Freya," she said softly, speaking to me as if I were a toddler holding a knife. "You were here. You were passed out on the sofa. We came to get you, but you were incoherent. You were screaming about the doctors. You had taken so many of those pills." My blood ran cold. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. "I was at the cemetery. I spoke to the priest. I held the urn," Bianca chimed in from the corner, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "It is okay. Frey, trauma does weird things to the brain. False memories are a trauma response. We know you wanted to be there. In your mind, you were there. That is what counts." I looked at the phone in her hand. She was getting a close-up of the empty takeout containers on the coffee table. They were rewriting reality in real time. If I screamed, if I threw a vase, I would only be providing the climax for their movie. "We are not here to argue about the past," my father interrupted, stepping past me to the kitchen table. He swept a stack of library books onto the floor with a careless wave of his arm to clear a space. The heavy thud of the books hitting the linoleum made me jump, but I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from reacting. He placed a blue folder on the table. It was thick. "We are here to help you survive the future," he said. "Sit down, Freya." I did not sit. I stood by the counter, putting the kitchen island between us. "What is that?" "It is a solution," Bianca said. Leaning against the refrigerator, she looked around my kitchen with open disdain. "Look at you, Freya. You are living in squalor. You are clearly having a breakdown. You cannot even wash a spoon, let alone manage a complex financial portfolio." "It is not a portfolio," I said. "It is a settlement. It is for Leo's foundation." "It is $1.1 million, my father corrected, his tone sharpening. "And it requires management, tax implications, investment strategies, asset allocation. Do you know what the current yield on a municipal bond is? Of course not. You fix old paper for a living." He tapped the blue folder. "This is a temporary asset management agreement," he said. "It grants us power of attorney over your finances for a period of 12 months, just until you get back on your feet, until you are lucid again." "I am lucid," I said. "You think you went to a funeral that you missed." My mother sighed. dabbing at a dry eye with a handkerchief. That is not lucid, sweetheart. That is psychosis. Bianca pushed off the fridge and walked toward me. Listen, Frey, I know business. I have been researching. If that money sits in a savings account, inflation will eat it alive. I can manage it. I can invest it in high-growth real estate assets. Triple the equity in 2 years. Then, when you are better, you will have even more money for your little charity project. Real estate assets, the Gilded Oaks. She was not even trying to hide it. She was asking me to sign over my dead son's justice so she could buy a house with a wine cellar. And if I do not sign, I asked. My voice was level, dead calm. My father's face hardened. The mask of the concerned patriarch slipped, revealing the bully underneath. Then we have no choice, he said. We have already spoken to Judge Henderson. Given your history of emotional instability and your current display of delusional behavior regarding the funeral, we have enough to file for an emergency conservatorship. We would hate to do it, my mother added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The police would have to come. They would take you to St. Jude's for a 72-hour psychiatric hold, just for observation, of course. But once you are in the system, Freya, it is very hard to get out. You would lose your rights. You would lose this apartment. And the money would come to us anyway, Bianca said, examining her fingernails. As your court-appointed guardians, this way is just cleaner, less embarrassing for everyone. The room seemed to tilt. They were threatening to lock me up. They were threatening to institutionalize me, to drug me until I actually did forget where I was, just to get their hands on the settlement check. I looked at the blue folder. I looked at the pen my father had placed on top of it. It was Mont Blanc, expensive, heavy. I wanted to lunge across the table and tear the folder in half. I wanted to scream that I had GPS tracking data that proved they were the liars. I wanted to play the recording of the priest, but I remembered the lawyer I had read about. I remembered the advice I had seen on forums for survivors of narcissistic abuse. Gray rock, be boring, be uninteresting, give them nothing to feed on. If I fought, they would have their evidence of my instability. If I showed them the GPS now, they would just change their tactics, destroy the evidence, or claim I hacked their phones. I needed to get them out of my house. I needed to get that folder to Elias Thorne. I took a slow breath. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face go slack, draining it of all defiance, all anger, all life. I became the broken thing they wanted me to be. I am tired, I said softly. We know, my mother cooed. Just sign, and you can sleep. I reached out and touched the folder. The leather grain felt cold under my fingertips. I cannot read it right now, I said, rubbing my temples. The words are swimming. My head hurts. I summarized it for you, Bianca said impatiently. Just sign the last page. No, I said. I did not raise my voice. I just stated it like a fact about the weather. I need to read it. I cannot sign what I cannot read. Daddy always taught me that. I looked at my father. I used the childhood name on purpose. It hit the mark. He straightened up, his ego stroked by the reminder of his own lessons, however twisted they were. That is true, he conceded. I did teach her that. I will read it today, I said. I will sleep. Then I will read it. Come back tomorrow morning. I will have it signed. Bianca looked like she wanted to argue. She opened her mouth, but my mother silenced her with a look. They thought they had won. They saw a woman who was too weak to fight, who just needed 24 hours to surrender with dignity. Tomorrow morning, my father said. 9 o'clock sharp. And Freya clean this place up. It smells like despair. Okay, I whispered. They left the way they came. A receding tide of expensive cologne and malice. My father left the blue folder on the table. As soon as the door clicked shut, the energy in the room shifted. The gray rock crumbled, revealing the diamond-hard rage beneath. I did not scream. I did not cry. I walked to the door and engaged the deadbolt. Then I wedged a chair under the handle. I walked back to the table and picked up the blue folder. My hands were perfectly steady. Despair, I said to the empty room, repeating my father's words. No, it did not smell like despair. It smelled like evidence. I grabbed my coat. I was not going to sleep. I was going to find the man who killed people like my father for a living. I was going to find Elias Thorne. 10 minutes after my family left, I was in a cab speeding toward the financial district. I clutched the blue folder to my chest as if it contained uranium. In a way, it did. It contained the radioactive decay of my family tree. I was headed to the Zenith Tower, a monolith of black glass and steel that pierced the gray skyline like a jagged shard of obsidian. This was the domain of Elias Thorne. Thorne was not a strip mall lawyer who chased ambulances. He was a shark who swam in the deep, freezing waters of high-stakes estate litigation. I knew of him because he had successfully dismantled the estate of a corrupt senator 2 years ago, a case I had followed closely while sitting in hospital waiting rooms. He was known for 2 things: an exorbitant hourly rate and a visceral hatred for moral hypocrisy. The elevator ride to the 45th floor made my ears pop. When the doors slid open, I stepped into a lobby that smelled of white tea and intimidation. The receptionist looked at my wet coat and mud-stained boots with polite confusion. But I did not apologize. I told her I had evidence of a 7-figure fraud in progress, and that I would pay Mr. Thorne's consultation fee in cash if I had to. Miraculously, or perhaps because I looked like a woman on the edge of something dangerous. I was ushered into his office 10 minutes later. Elias Thorne was standing by a window that spanned the entire wall, looking down at the city like a god deciding which ant to crush. He turned as I entered. He was younger than I expected, perhaps early 40s, with hair the color of steel wool and eyes that were unsettlingly sharp. He did not smile. He did not offer me coffee. He pointed to a chair made of chrome and black leather. "You have 5 minutes to convince me not to bill you for wasting my time," Thorne said. His voice was smooth, low, and completely devoid of warmth. I did not sit down. I walked to his desk, a slab of polished concrete, and slapped the blue folder down. "My son died 7 days ago," I said. "My family skipped his funeral yesterday to tour a luxury estate. They forged a narrative that I am insane. This morning, they broke into my home and tried to force me to sign this. They say it is a temporary management agreement." Thorne looked at the folder, then at me. He saw the shaking in my hands, but he also saw the set of my jaw. He sat down and flipped the folder open. He read in silence. The only sound in the room was the hum of the hard drive in his computer and the sleet hitting the window. As he turned the pages, his expression shifted from boredom to focused intensity. When he reached the final page, a cold, humorless smile touched his lips. "Cured temporary," he repeated, tasting the word like spoiled milk. "This document grants them irrevocable power of attorney. Do you know what irrevocable means, Ms. Norwood?" "It means once you sign, you cannot unsign. It means they could legally drain your accounts, sell your furniture, and commit you to a facility, and you would not have the legal standing to buy a pack of gum without their permission." "I figured," I said, "but that is not all." I pulled out my phone. I placed it on the desk and played the recording I had made 30 minutes ago. The audio was clear. My mother's fake sobbing, Bianca's voice talking about false memories, my father's threat about the police and the psychiatric hold. Then, I swiped to the next image, the screenshot of the GPS map showing them at the Gilded Oaks, the timestamp matching the funeral service. Thorne leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. He looked at the GPS data, then back at the legal document. "They are not just greedy," Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave. "They are tactically stupid. That is a dangerous combination." He spun his monitor around so I could see it. He had been typing while listening. "I pulled the court filings for the county probate court," he said. "Look at this." I leaned in. I saw my name. In re the estate and person of Freya Norwood. "They filed an ex parte petition for emergency conservatorship at 8 o'clock this morning," Thorne said. "Before they even came to your apartment, the blue folder was Plan B. Plan A is to turn you into a second Britney Spears." I felt the blood drain from my face. "They already filed it." "Yes," Thorne said, tapping the screen. They are claiming you are catatonic, suicidal, and a danger to yourself. They have asked for immediate control over your person and your assets. If a judge signs this, you cease to be a person in the eyes of the law. You become a ward of the state, and they become your keepers. I stared at the screen. My father's name was listed as the petitioner, Arthur Norwood, the man who taught me to ride a bike, the man who is currently trying to legally erase me. I should have been terrified. I should have been weeping on Elias Thorne's expensive rug, but instead, the heat in my chest flared white-hot. The fear evaporated, burned away by the sheer magnitude of their betrayal. I looked up at Thorne. He was watching me closely, assessing me. He was waiting to see if I would break. "Mr. Thorne," I said, "I do not want to just stop them. I do not want to just keep my money." "What do you want?" he asked. "I want to hurt them," I said. "I want to take the things they love the most. I want to take their reputation. I want to take their credit score. I want to take their freedom. I want them to lose everything they have ever valued." Thorne's eyes glittered. For the first time, he looked genuinely interested. "Revenge is expensive," he warned. "I have $1 million, I countered, "and I am willing to spend every cent of it to make sure they never buy that house." Thorne closed the blue folder. He stood up and walked around the desk, leaning against the edge, crossing his arms. "If we fight the conservatorship petition today, it is your word against theirs," he said, switching into strategy mode. "They have witnesses who will say you were acting erratic. They have their own testimony. Judges tend to side with concerned parents over grieving. Single mothers, it is a coin toss." "So we lose?" "No," Thorne said. "We do not fight the filing. We stall it. We invite them to a mediation." "Mediation?" I asked. "You want me to talk to them. I want you to let them think they have won." Thorne explained. "We contacted their lawyer. We say you are open to a structured family arrangement. We invite them to a formal mediation session to iron out the details. We put them in a room with a court reporter. We put them under oath." He gestured to my phone. "Right now. That recording is inadmissible in some contexts because of consent laws. But in a deposition, in a sworn mediation statement, if we can get them to lie on the official record, if we can get them to deny being at the Gilded Oaks, if we can get them to claim under oath that you were incompetent, then we have them." "Perjury," I whispered. "Better," Thorne said. "We trap them in a lie so egregious that no judge will ever trust them again. We do not just defend you. We hand them a shovel and let them dig the hole deep enough to bury themselves. We use the honey trap. We dangle the money. We act submissive. We make them feel so confident that they get sloppy." He extended a hand. It was manicured and cool to the touch. "I am expensive, Freya," he said, "but I am very, very good at destroying hypocrites." I took his hand. I squeezed it hard. "When do we start?" "Right now," Thorne said, picking up his phone. "Go home. Unlock your door. Answer your mother's texts. Apologize for being difficult. Tell them you have thought about it and you want to do this the right way, with a lawyer present to ensure everything is legal. Play the frightened daughter." "I can do that," I said. "Good," Thorne said, his eyes narrowing. "Because from this moment on, you are not a victim. You are the bait." I walked out of the Zenith Tower and back into the rain. The city felt different now. The gray sky wasn't oppressive. It was camouflage. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Bianca. I took a deep breath, summoned the ghost of the girl I used to be, and typed a reply. "I am sorry. I was scared. Let's talk." I hit send. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for the rats to come for the cheese. The 48 hours leading up to the mediation were an exercise in disciplined paranoia. I spent the daylight hours playing the part of the compliant daughter, answering my mother's checking-in texts with monosyllabic apologies and emojis of hearts that felt like lies burning my fingertips. But at night, the apartment became a war room. Elias Thorne had given me specific instructions. "They think you are a technophobe who restores paper for a living. Use that. Let them get comfortable in your digital space, but keep the lights on. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at a security dashboard Thorne's IT specialist had helped me set up remotely. It was a simple program that monitored access logs for my primary accounts. I had not changed my passwords yet. Thorne had been adamant about that. If you change the locks, they know you are awake, he had said. Let them walk through the front door so we can catch them on the camera. At 11 o'clock at night, the alert flashed on my screen, a silent red banner across the top of the monitor. New login detected iCloud account. Device iPhone 15 Pro Max. Location Westchester, New York. My stomach turned over. That was Bianca's phone. I knew it because she had pretentiously named the device Queen Bee's Throne in her settings, a detail visible in the device list. I watched the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs, not with fear, but with a cold, predatory anticipation. She had bypassed the two-factor authentication because my old iPad, which I had left at my parents' house 2 Christmases ago and never reclaimed, was still a trusted device. She must have dug it out of a drawer to approve the login. But how did she get the password? Then it hit me, and the realization made me grip the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. My password was 6 digits, 041216, April 12, 2016, Leo's birthday. She had used the day my son was born, the happiest, most terrifying day of my life, as a skeleton key to break into my privacy and dismantle his legacy. It was a violation so intimate it felt physical, like she had reached into my chest and squeezed my lungs. I picked up the burner phone Thorne had given me. He did not trust my main line and dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. "They are in," I said. "Watch them," Thorne commanded. His voice was crisp, awake. "Do not intervene. Record everything. What are they doing?" "She is in my email," I whispered, watching the activity log refresh. "She is not reading anything. She is navigating to the drafts folder." "Smart," Thorne murmured. "If she sends an email, it creates a sent log. If she leaves it in drafts, it looks like a thought you were afraid to speak. It sits there like a time bomb waiting for a coroner to find it." The activity stopped after 3 minutes. The session ended. Bianca had logged out. "Go in," Thorne said. "See what she planted." I logged into my own email from my secure laptop. My hands were trembling, not from the cold of the apartment, but from a visceral dread of what I was about to see. I clicked on the drafts folder. There was one new item at the top of the list. No subject line. I opened it. The text was short, written in a stream of consciousness style that mimicked how I wrote in my journals. Journals Bianca had read years ago when we were teenagers, but the content was a grotesque distortion of my reality. "I cannot do this anymore. The rain is too loud. Leo is calling me. I can hear him crying for me to come. I am so tired of fighting. Bianca, please. You are the only one strong enough to handle the world. Take the money. Build something beautiful. I just want to go to sleep. I just want to be with my baby." I had to push the chair back and put my head between my knees to keep from vomiting. The cruelty was surgical. She had used my grief, my love for Leo, and twisted it into a suicide note. She had even included the details about the rain that had soaked me at the cemetery while she drank wine. The draft was time-stamped with today's date, but the text inside began with Tuesday night, attempting to frame it as something written in the depths of despair on the evening of the funeral. "Freya," Thorne's voice came from the phone lying on the table. "Talk to me." "It is a suicide note," I choked out. She wrote a suicide note and signed my name. She is trying to prove I'm a danger to myself. If the judge sees this, he won't see it the way they want him to, Thorne cut in, his tone hard and grounding. "Do not delete it. Do not touch a single character. We are going to strip that file to its bones." "What do you mean?" "Metadata," Thorne said. "Every digital action leaves a fingerprint. Bianca thinks because she typed it on your account, it looks like you. But the server logs capture the IP address of the device that created the draft. Connect me to your screen." I authorized the remote connection. For the next 20 minutes, I watched as Thorne and his forensic specialist, a silent figure named Silas who joined the call, dissected the email draft. They pulled up the source header, a block of gibberish text that meant nothing to me but everything to them. "Got it," Silas said. His voice was mechanical. "Originating IP address is not residential. It is a public Wi-Fi network." "Trace it," Thorne ordered. A map popped up on my screen. A red pin dropped onto a street location in Westchester. "The Roasted Bean Coffee Wine Bar," Silas read. "Located at 450 Oakwood Drive," I gasped. "I know where that is. It is the cafe right outside the entrance gates to the Gilded Oaks. We stopped there once to look at the menu." "Check the timestamp again," Thorne said. "Creation time. 2:14 in the afternoon on Tuesday." Silas confirmed. I looked at the clock on the wall. At 2:14 on Tuesday, I was standing over an open grave. "So," Thorne said, the satisfaction in his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "At the exact moment you were burying your son, your sister was not only sipping Pinot Noir near a luxury estate, but she was also logging into your account to forge a suicide note to frame you for incompetence." He let out a low, dark laugh. "They did not just plant evidence. Freya, they handed us the murder weapon with their fingerprints all over it. This proves premeditated fraud. It proves malicious intent. And because she used a public Wi-Fi network in a high-end cafe, there will be security cameras." "Can we get the footage?" I asked. "By the time the mediation starts, I will have a high-definition video of Bianca sipping a latte while typing your death wish," Thorne promised. "This is it. This is the dirty hands doctrine in full effect. They cannot claim to be acting in your best interest when we can prove they were actively plotting your demise while the dirt was still fresh on your son's coffin." I looked at the email draft again. I just want to be with my baby. I closed the laptop slowly. The sickness in my stomach was gone, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. "She wants to talk about death," I whispered to the empty room. "Fine. We will talk about the death of her future." "Get some sleep, Freya," Thorne said gently. "You have a big performance tomorrow. You need to look rested enough to enjoy watching them fall apart." I hung up the phone. I did not sleep, but I did not cry either. I sat in the dark and watched the city lights, thinking about the password. April 12th. Bianca had tried to use Leo to destroy me. Now, Leo was going to be the reason she lost everything. The law is often described as a shield, but as I sat across from Elias Thorne the next morning, I realized that in the right hands, it is a guillotine. The storm outside had finally broken, leaving the New York skyline scrubbed clean and sharp against a pale blue sky. Inside Thorne's office, the atmosphere was surgical. The investigative phase was over. We were now entering the strategic phase, and Thorne was laying out our weaponry with the dispassionate precision of a general preparing for a siege. "Most people think a conservatorship hearing is a debate about your mental health," Thorne said, leaning forward. His gray eyes were intense, locking onto mine. "They think it is a medical question. Is Freya Norwood depressed? Is she stable? But we are not going to argue about medicine, Freya. We are going to argue about equity." He slid a thick legal volume across the desk, open to a flagged page. "This is the doctrine of unclean hands," he said. "It is an equitable defense. In simple terms, it means that a party who asks the court for help must come to the court with clean hands. You cannot ask a judge to grant you control over another person's life to protect them if you have committed fraud or acted in bad faith regarding that same person." I looked at the text, dense with Latin phrases and case citations. "So, because they forged the suicide note, they have unclean hands." "Exactly," Thorne nodded. "But we are going further. In this state, there is a rarely invoked statute known as forfeiture by misconduct regarding inheritance and beneficiary rights. Usually, it applies to someone who kills a person to get their inheritance, the slayer rule, but 3 years ago, a precedent was set extending it to severe financial abuse and fraud, attempted by potential guardians." He paused to let the weight of his words settle in the room. If we prove that your parents and sister manufactured evidence to trick the court into stripping your rights, we can petition for a summary judgment that not only dismisses their case, but permanently disqualifies them from ever inheriting a single cent from you, even if you died tomorrow of natural causes, and you had no will. The law would treat them as if they were already dead. They would get nothing. The state would take your assets before they did. I felt a chill run down my spine, but it was not fear. It was the thrill of absolute power. They lose everything, forever. Forever, Thorne confirmed. They are gambling their entire future relationship with you, and their financial safety net, on this lie. And they do not even know they are walking into a minefield. Why are they rushing? I asked. I understand greed, but this feels frantic. They filed the petition before the funeral flowers even wilted. Why the panic? Thorne smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a new file, thinner than the others. Because your sister, Bianca, is not just greedy. She is mathematically illiterate and dangerously confident. He opened the file and spun a document around for me to see. It was a loan agreement, but it was not from a bank. The header featured a logo I did not recognize, something aggressive and tacky. Investigator Silas dug into Bianca's finances, Thorne explained. We found this. It is a hard money loan agreement signed 4 days ago. I scanned the numbers. My breath hitched. $100,000. I read aloud. Interest rate, 18%. She borrowed $100,000 from a private lender, basically a legalized loan shark, to put down the non-refundable deposit on the house at the Gilded Oaks, Thorne said. She was so certain she would have access to your $1.1 million by the end of the week that she leveraged herself to the hilt. The closing date for the house is this Friday. If she does not come up with the remaining balance, or at least proof of funds to secure a traditional mortgage, she defaults, and she loses the deposit, I whispered. She loses the $100,000, Thorne corrected, which she does not have, which means the lenders come for her condo, her car, and knowing how these contracts are written. Probably your parents' house too, since I suspect Arthur co-signed as a guarantor. The puzzle pieces clicked together with a deafening snap. The urgency, the gaslighting, the forged suicide note. They were not just trying to buy a luxury house. They were trying to prevent a financial avalanche that Bianca had triggered the moment she signed that deposit check. They needed my son's death money to plug the hole in their own sinking ship. They are terrified, I realized. They are not attacking me because they are strong. They are attacking me because they are drowning. Precisely, Thorne said. And drowning people climb on top of anyone to save themselves. That makes them dangerous. But it also makes them predictable. They need you to sign, or they need the court to force you to sign. Within 48 hours, they are out of time. As if summoned by the devil himself. My phone buzzed on the desk. I looked at the screen. It was a text from my father. I picked it up and read it. The message was devoid of the fake concern they had plastered all over the previous days. The mask had slipped completely. Dad. Stop playing games. Freya, we know you are sick. We know you are unfit. Do not make us drag your name through the mud in public court. Sign the papers to preserve whatever dignity you have left. This is your last chance. I showed the screen to Thorne. He read it and let out a short, derisive snort. They are trying to bully you into submission because they cannot afford a long legal battle, Thorne said. They need a quick surrender. Give it to them. What should I say? Tell them you are done fighting, Thorne instructed. Tell them you will do whatever they want. Tell them you just want it to be over. Lure them into the mediation room tomorrow. Once they are seated at that table, under the impression that they have won, they will lower their guard, and that is when we close the door. I took a deep breath. I typed the words slowly, my thumbs hovering over the keys. Every letter felt like a lie, but a necessary one, a lie to catch a liar. Freya. You are right. I am tired. I cannot fight you anymore. Let us meet at the mediation tomorrow. I will listen to your arrangement. I just want peace. I hit send. Almost immediately. 3 bubbles appeared. indicating he was typing back. Then they disappeared. Then it appeared again. He was likely showing the phone to my mother and Bianca. They were probably high-fiving. They were probably popping another bottle of champagne, thinking the stupid, weak scapegoat had finally folded. Finally, the reply came. Dad. Good decision. We will see you at 10. It is for the best. They bought it, I said, placing the phone face down on the desk. Of course they did, Thorne said, closing the file on the hard money loan. Narcissists always believe their victims are weak. They mistake silence for submission. They have no idea that the silence is actually the sound of a weapon loading. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Go home, Freya. Rest. Do not engage with them further. Tomorrow morning, you walk into that conference room as a victim, and you walk out the owner of their fate. I stood up, feeling a strange lightness in my limbs. The grief for Leo was still there, a heavy stone in my heart, but the helplessness was gone. I had a map, I had a guide, and I had a trap that was set to spring with the force of $1.1 million. Mr. Thorne, I asked at the door. Yes. Do I get to see their faces when you tell them about the clean hands doctrine? Thorne turned, and for the first time, his smile reached his eyes. It was a terrifying look. Freya, he said softly, I would not miss it for the world. The conference room at the law firm of Pringle, Holloway, and associates smelled of lemon polish and old money. It was located on the 32nd floor, 12 stories below Elias Thorne's office, a geographical fact that felt strangely symbolic. The table was a massive slab of mahogany, long enough to land a small aircraft on, and sitting at the far end was my execution squad. My family had dressed for the occasion. They were clad in somber, expensive black, the same wardrobe they should have worn to the funeral they skipped. My father, Arthur, wore a suit that cost more than my first car, his face set in a mask of pained stoicism. My mother, Lenora, was a vision of fragile maternity, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, and Bianca sat between them, wearing a high-collared black dress that made her look like a grieving widow rather than a sister who had just leveraged herself into bankruptcy to buy a party house. Their lawyer, Mr. Pringle, was a man who looked like he had been constructed out of ham and hair gel. He had a flushed, expansive face and a smile that did not quite reach his predatory little eyes. He sat with his hands clasped over a file thick enough to be a novel. I sat on the opposite side, next to Elias Thorne. Thorne was silent. He had barely spoken a word since we entered, merely nodding at Pringle and taking his seat. He was a statue of gray wool and indifference. I had followed his instructions perfectly. I wore no makeup. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and I kept my eyes lower, fixed on the grain of the wood table. To them, I looked beaten. To me, I looked like a coiled spring. Thank you all for coming, Pringle began, his voice oily and patronizing. I know this is a difficult time for the Norwood family. We are here today not as adversaries, but as a support system. My clients love their daughter very much. They want only to ensure her safety and well-being during this acute psychiatric crisis. Thorne did not respond. He just gestured with one hand for Pringle to continue. Pringle cleared his throat, slightly rattled by the lack of resistance. Given Ms. Norwood's history and the tragic loss of her son, it is the family's position that she is currently suffering from a severe dissociative episode. We believe she is a danger to her own financial future and, potentially, her physical safety. That is a strong accusation, Thorne said. His voice was soft, bored even. Do you have evidence to support a petition for emergency conservatorship? We do, Bianca said. She did not wait for her lawyer to prompt her. She was eager, too eager. She pulled out a tablet and slid it across the mahogany table toward us. I went to check on my sister yesterday morning, Bianca said, her voice trembling with a rehearsed quiver. I was terrified. She was not answering her phone. When I got there, it was a nightmare. I took this video because I knew no one would believe how bad it had gotten. Thorne pressed play. I watched the screen without blinking. It was my apartment, but it looked like a dungeon. Bianca had applied a filter that drained the color and increased the contrast, making the shadows look like black holes. The camera panned jerkily over the pile of laundry, the unwashed dishes, and the closed curtains. "Look at that," Bianca narrated, pointing a manicured finger at the screen. Rotting food, darkness. She was sitting in the middle of it, rocking back and forth. She did not even know who I was. She kept calling me by her dead son's name. I felt a flash of heat in my chest at the lie, but I remembered Thorne's command, "Let them talk. Every word is a nail in their coffin." I dug my fingernails into my palms under the table and remained silent. "It is clear evidence of self-neglect," Pringle added gravely. "The environment is uninhabitable. A person in her right mind does not live like that." "Is that the extent of your evidence?" Thorne asked, pushing the tablet back. "No," my mother spoke up. Her voice was breathy, the sound of a woman on the verge of a faint. There is the letter." Lenora reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a printout. She held it as if it were radioactive. "After we left, I was so worried I logged into her email." My mother lied. "I know her password because she gave it to me years ago for emergencies. I wanted to see if she had contacted a doctor. Instead, I found this in her drafts." She slid the paper to the center of the table. It was the suicide note, the one Bianca had forged at the coffee shop. "Read it," my father commanded, his voice thick with fake emotion. "Read what our daughter wrote." Thorne picked up the paper. He read it slowly, his face impassive. Then he looked up at my mother. "This is very disturbing," Thorne said. "You found this in the drafts folder." "Yes," my mother sobbed. "But that is not all. I actually saw her typing it." The room went dead silent. Even Pringle looked surprised. This was an improvisation. Lenora was going off script to seal the deal. "You saw her typing it," Thorne repeated, leaning forward slightly. "Can you clarify that statement for the record?" "Mrs. Norwood. This is a formal mediation. Your statements are being transcribed." "I saw her," my mother insisted, her eyes wide and wet. "When we were at her apartment yesterday morning, she was at her laptop. She was typing frantically, crying. I saw the words on the screen over her shoulder. 'I just want to be with my baby.' That is what she typed. I saw it with my own eyes. She was saying goodbye." I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. She was looking right back, and there was no love in her eyes. There was only desperation. She was swearing on a lie to strip me of my freedom so she could pay for a renovation. Thorne looked at the court reporter in the corner, who was typing furiously. "You saw her typing this document on her laptop inside her apartment on Wednesday morning." Thorne clarified. "Yes," Lenora said firmly. "I swear it on my grandson's grave." The blasphemy of it almost made me lunge across the table. On Leo's grave. She was using the boy she ignored to swear a lie that would destroy his mother. "We have heard enough," Pringle interrupted, sensing that perhaps his client was talking too much, though he had no idea how fatal the damage actually was. He pushed the blue folder toward me, the same one from my kitchen. "Freya," Pringle said, his voice dropping to a soothing, paternal tone. "We do not want to file this letter with the court. It would become a public record. It would be humiliating for you. If you sign the voluntary conservatorship agreement now, we can keep this private." He tapped the document. "Your father will take control of the $1.1 million settlement. He will invest it safely. In exchange, the estate will provide you with a monthly allowance of $2,000. We will also arrange for a 2-month stay at the Serenity Hills Wellness Center. It is a lovely facility. You can get the rest you need." $2,000 a month. They were stealing over $1 million and offering me a pittance to go to a mental ward. "It is a generous offer," Bianca said, crossing her arms. "Considering you are obviously unfit to manage $1, let alone $1 million. My father leaned in. "Sign it, Freya. Do it for the family. Do not force us to show a judge that you are suicidal. If we show this letter to Judge Henderson, he will lock you up for your own protection, and you will not get a say in anything. We are giving you a choice." I looked at the pen lying on the mahogany. It was a cheap plastic stick pen, stark against the expensive wood. I looked at Elias Thorne. He was sitting perfectly still, his hands folded on the table. He was waiting for me. This was the moment. I could sign, or I could signal the kill. I looked at Pringle. "If I do not sign, you are submitting these items, the video and the letter, as official evidence to the court." "We are," Pringle said, puffing up his chest. "We are prepared to file them immediately following this meeting if a resolution is not reached." I looked at my mother one last time. "You are sure you saw me write it?" "Mom." "I am sure," she said, her jaw set. "I saw you." I turned to Thorne. I gave him the smallest of nods. Thorne smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who just watched the guillotine blade drop. "Mr. Pringle," Thorne said, his voice cutting through the thick air like a razor. "We decline your offer." Pringle blinked. "Excuse me, did you not hear what I said? We have proof she is suicidal." "You have proof of something." "Certainly," Thorne said. He reached out and picked up the printout of the email. He held it up to the light. "We formally accept your submission of this evidence," Thorne said. "In fact, we insist on it. Please, mark it as Exhibit A." "You are bluffing," Bianca sneered. "She is going to lose everything." "It is noted," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly pleasant register. "The plaintiff submits the suicide note and the witness testimony of Lenora Norwood as the foundational basis of their petition. We are ready to proceed." Pringle looked at Thorne, then at me. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his sweaty face. He realized, too late, that the sheep he thought he was slaughtering was actually a wolf waiting for him to open the gate. I picked up the plastic pen, but I did not sign the paper. I twirled it between my fingers, looked Pringle in the eye, and set it down with a definitive click. "I am ready for the truth," I said. "Are you?" Elias Thorne did not shout. He did not slam his fist on the table. He simply stood up, unbuttoned his suit jacket with a casual, fluid motion, and reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a slender black cable and plugged his laptop into the central media console of the conference table. The massive 80-inch monitor on the wall, which had previously been black, flickered to life. "Mr. Pringle," Thorne said, his voice terrifyingly conversational. "Before my client considers your generous offer of $2,000 a month to live in a psychiatric facility, I think we should examine the provenance of your primary evidence, Exhibit A, as you called it." Pringle frowned, his hand hovering over his file. "This is highly irregular. We are here to discuss terms, not review IT specs. We are here to discover the truth," Thorne corrected. He tapped a key. The screen is filled with a complex timeline. It was a digital forensic report, stark and undeniable against the dark background. "This is the metadata for the email draft your client, Mrs. Lenora Norwood, claims she saw Freya typing yesterday morning." Thorne explained. He used a laser pointer, the red dot dancing across the projected image. "As you can see, the file creation timestamp is not Wednesday morning. It is Tuesday, specifically Tuesday at 2:14 in the afternoon." Thorne turned his gaze to my mother. She had gone very still, her handkerchief frozen halfway to her eyes. "Mrs. Norwood," Thorne said. "At 2:14 on Tuesday, Freya was standing at the graveside service for her son. There are 5 witnesses, including the presiding priest, who can testify to her physical location. Unless Freya has the ability to bilocate, she was not at a computer." I might have been confused about the day," my mother stammered, her face flushing a blotchy red. "Trauma messes with time, but I saw her. I know I saw her." "Let us look at the location," Thorne interrupted, ignoring her pivot. "Every internet connection leaves a digital fingerprint called an IP address. If Freya wrote this in her apartment, the IP should match her home router. It does not." The red laser dot moved to a map on the right side of the screen. The email was created using a public Wi-Fi network, Thorne said. Specifically, the network belongs to the Roasted Bean Coffee and Wine Bar. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a vacuum. I looked at Bianca. Her skin, usually tanned and glowing, had turned the color of old parchment. She was staring at the table, refusing to look at the screen. "That is impossible," Pringle blustered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Wi-Fi signals can bounce. This is circumstantial." "We anticipated you might say that," Thorne said. "So we obtained a subpoena for the security footage from the Roasted Bean. It is amazing what you can get when you allege felony identity theft." He clicked the remote. The video feed was crisp and high definition. It showed a corner booth at the coffee shop. The timestamp in the corner read Tuesday, 2:14 p.m., and there they were. Bianca was sitting in the booth, her phone in one hand, typing furiously on a laptop with the other. My mother sat across from her. They were not mourning. They were not crying. They were laughing. On the screen. Bianca typed something, stopped, read it to my mother, and then threw her head back in laughter. My mother covered her mouth, giggling, and clinked her wine glass against Bianca's latte mug. Thorne paused the video on that frame, the image of my mother and sister toasting their cleverness at the exact moment my son was being lowered into the mud. "Mr. Pringle," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "Your client just swore under oath that she saw Freya typing that note in a fit of suicidal depression. The video shows your client drinking Chardonnay, while her daughter forges a suicide note on a laptop that matches the device ID of the draft." Pringle looked at the screen, then at his clients. He looked like a man who had just realized he was holding a live grenade. He slammed his folder shut. "My clients were under extreme duress," Pringle tried, but he was drowning. There must be a context." "There is context." Thorne cut him off mercilessly. "Let us talk about why they were at that coffee shop. It is located exactly 2 miles from the entrance to the Gilded Oaks." Thorne clicked again. The screen changed to the GPS data I had captured the evidence from the day of the funeral. "While Freya was burying her child, your clients were touring a luxury estate," Thorne narrated. "They spent 3 hours inspecting a property listed for $1.2 million, and interestingly enough, we found a hard money loan application initiated by Bianca Norwood for the down payment, dated the same day. I watched my father, Arthur Norwood, the man who demanded respect, the man who claimed to be the protector of the family, was shrinking in his chair. He could not look at me. He was staring at his hands, which were trembling violently. This was never about Freya's mental health," Thorne continued, pacing slowly behind his chair. "This was a liquidity crisis. Bianca leveraged herself into a corner, and they needed Freya's settlement money to bail her out. They needed Freya to be incapacitated so they could access the funds before the closing date on Friday." "That is a lie," Bianca shrieked. It was a sudden, jagged sound that shattered the tension. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "We love her. We wanted to invest the money for her. She is too stupid to handle it. We were trying to help." "Sit down, Bianca," Pringle hissed, grabbing her arm. "No," she screamed, pulling away. "She is the selfish one. She is going to waste it on some stupid charity while I have real ambition. I deserve that house. I deserve a life." Thorne smiled. He did not need to say anything. Bianca was confessing. "Ambition," Thorne repeated. "Is that what you call it?" "Let us hear what you called it in the privacy of Freya's kitchen." He played the final piece of evidence. The audio recording. My father's voice filled the room. Tinny but unmistakable. "If that money sits in a savings account, inflation will eat it alive. I can invest it in high-growth real estate assets." Then my mother's voice. "Once you're in the system, Freya, it is very hard to get out." Thorne stopped the recording. "That," Thorne said, pointing at the speaker, "is conspiracy to commit fraud. It is extortion, and based on Mrs. Norwood's testimony 5 minutes ago, it is now perjury." Thorne turned to Pringle, who was pale and sweating profusely. Mr. Pringle, under the state statutes regarding forfeiture by misconduct and the doctrine of unclean hands, we are formally moving to dismiss your petition with prejudice. Furthermore, we are submitting this entire evidence package to the district attorney's office for review regarding criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and filing false instruments with the court. Now wait a minute, Pringle stammered, standing up. Criminal charges. We can settle this. We can withdraw the petition. There is no need to involve the DA. The mediation is over, Thorne said. Snapping his laptop shut, the screen went black, plunging the room back into the dim, natural light. But the image of their laughter was burned into everyone's retinas. You do not get to attempt to frame a grieving mother for insanity and then walk away when you get caught. I stood up. My legs felt strong. The shaking was gone. I looked across the table at the people who shared my DNA. They looked like strangers. They looked small, petty, and terrified. My mother looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time. Tears of fear. Freya, she whispered, please. We are your family. We were just worried about you. You know how much I worry. I walked to the edge of the table. I looked her dead in the eye. You were not worried, I said, my voice steady and cold. You were calculating. You did not worry that I would die. Mom, you were only worried that I would not die fast enough for you to get the check. That is not true, my father croaked, reaching a hand out toward me. Freya, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I said. Reasonable people do not let monsters control their lives. Goodbye, Arthur. Goodbye, Lenora. I did not look at Bianca. She did not deserve my gaze. I turned my back on them and walked toward the door, where Elias Thorne was holding it open for me, behind me. I heard the sound of Bianca sobbing, a raw, ugly sound of a spoiled child who has finally been told no. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The collapse of a facade is a noisy thing. I expected silence after my declaration, but instead, the room erupted into the chaotic noise of self-preservation. Mr. Pringle was the first to move. The oily confidence he had worn like a second skin evaporated instantly, replaced by the frantic, jerky movements of a rat sensing the ship was not just taking on water, but already halfway to the ocean floor. He did not look at his clients. He did not offer them a reassuring pat on the shoulder. He stood up so abruptly that his expensive leather chair tipped backward and slammed against the wall with a sound like a gunshot. I am withdrawing as counsel effective immediately, Pringle announced, his voice cracking. He began shoving papers into his briefcase with zero regard for organization. Documents crumpled and tore in his haste. I was not informed of the existence of contradictory digital evidence. I was led to believe the witness testimony was truthful. I cannot represent clients who unknowingly implicate me in subornation of perjury. You cannot leave, my father bellowed, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. We paid you a retainer. You work for us. The retainer is non-refundable, Pringle snapped, snapping the latches of his briefcase shut. And I work for the court. Mr. Norwood, I am not losing my license because your daughter decided to forge a suicide note on a coffee shop Wi-Fi network. You are on your own. He practically ran for the door, brushing past Elias Thorne without making eye contact. The door swung shut behind him, leaving a vacuum of air that sucked the last bit of hope out of my family's lungs. Thorne watched him go with mild amusement, then turned his gaze back to the three people freezing in their seats. Smart man, Thorne commented dryly. He knows that when the district attorney reviews this file, anyone standing too close to the blast zone is going to get burned. District attorney, my mother whispered, clutching her pearls as if they could strangle the truth out of the air. Surely that is not necessary. Mr. Thorne, this is a family dispute. We can handle this internally. Fraud, identity theft, and filing false instruments with the court are not family disputes. Mrs. Norwood, Thorne said, his voice hard as iron. They are felonies. My office has a legal obligation to report crimes committed during the discovery process. The courier is already en route to the DA's office with the hard drives. It was then that the silence was broken by a ringtone. It was an upbeat, bubbly pop song emanating from Bianca's purse, a jarring, cheerful soundtrack to her absolute destruction. Bianca stared at the bag as if it contained a viper. She reached in with trembling fingers and pulled out her phone. The screen lit up, illuminating her tear-streaked face. "It is the realtor," she whispered. Her voice was thin, terrified. "It is the agent for the Gilded Oaks." "Answer it," I said. It was the first time I had spoken since I stood up. "Tell her the good news," Bianca answered on speaker, her thumb slipping on the glass. "Bianca, darling," the realtor's voice chirped through the room, aggressively happy. "I just wanted to call and congratulate you. The sellers accepted your offer. We just need the proof of funds for the remaining balance by 5 o'clock today to finalize the closing schedule. I have the champagne ready." Bianca made a sound that was half sob, half wail. She looked at me, then at the phone. I do not have the funds," she stammered. "Oh," the realtor's voice dropped, the cheerfulness vanishing instantly. "Well, as per the contract, if you cannot show liquidity by closing of business, the deal is void, and you know the deposit is non-refundable, $100,000. Bianca, I warned you about that." "Please," Bianca begged, clutching the phone with both hands. "I just need a few more days. My sister. There was a delay with the trust." "The sellers have a backup offer," the realtor cut her off. "I am sorry. The contract is terminated. You have forfeited the deposit." The line went dead. Bianca dropped the phone. It hit the mahogany table with a heavy thud. She looked at her hands. Then she looked at her father. "The loan?" she gasped, her eyes wide with panic. "Daddy, the loan. I borrowed the deposit. It was a hard money loan, 18% interest. If I do not pay it back in 30 days, they take the collateral." "What collateral did you use?" my father asked, his voice shaking. "The condo," Bianca whispered. And your car. I forged your signature as a guarantor." My father let out a roar of pure, impotent rage. He stood up, knocking his chair over, but he did not turn on Bianca. He turned on me. In his twisted mind, this was not Bianca's fault for gambling with money she did not have. It was my fault for not letting them steal mine. "You did this," he screamed. His face contorted into a mask of hatred. He lunged toward me, his hands curled into fists. "You ungrateful, selfish little wretch. We gave you life. You are ruining this family over money you do not even deserve. You killed us." I did not flinch. I did not step back. I watched him come toward me with a strange sense of detachment. He looked like a monster, but a monster made of paper. Before he could get within 3 feet of me, 2 large uniformed security guards stepped out from the shadows near the door. Thorne had arranged for them to be in the room, silent and waiting. One guard caught my father by the arm, spinning him around and pinning him against the wall with professional efficiency. "Arthur," my mother shrieked, standing up, "do not hurt him. He has high blood pressure." "Then he should not try to assault a client in a law firm," Thorne said calmly. "Gentlemen, please escort Mr. Norwood to the lobby and call the police if he resists." "Let me go," my father shouted, struggling uselessly against the guard's grip. He looked back at me, his eyes burning. "You are dead to me. Freya, you hear me? You are no daughter of mine." "I accepted that years ago," I said softly. The guards dragged him out, his cursing echoing down the hallway. The room was suddenly quiet again, save for Bianca's jagged breathing. She had put her head on the table and was sobbing into her arms. My mother, Lenora, was the last one standing. She looked at the empty chair where her husband had been, then at her ruined daughter, and finally at me. She realized that aggression had failed. So, she switched to her oldest weapon, guilt. She walked around the table, avoiding Thorne, and stopped a few feet from me. She clasped her hands together in a pleading gesture. "Freya," she said. her voice trembling with that practiced fragility. "Look at what is happening. The family is tearing apart. Your sister is going to lose her home. Your father could go to jail. Is this what you want? Is this what Leo would have wanted?" The mention of my son's name in her mouth felt like a violation. "Do not say his name," I said. "We are all you have," my mother continued, ignoring me, pressing on with the narrative that had kept me compliant for 30 years. "You have no husband. Your son is gone. If you walk out that door and do this to us, you will have no one. You will be completely alone in this world. Who will come to your birthday? Who will take care of you when you are sick? We are your blood. Freya, you cannot survive without us." She reached out to touch my arm. I looked at her hand, the hand that had signed checks for Bianca while I worked 2 jobs, the hand that had held a wineglass while I held a funeral. I stepped back, out of her reach. I adjusted my coat, buttoning it all the way to the top. I felt a sensation I had not felt in years. It was lighter than air. It was the absence of a weight I had carried since childhood. I realized that the love she was threatening to withhold was actually a parasitic cord that had been draining the life out of me. "You are right, Mom," I said. "I will be alone." I looked at Bianca, weeping over her lost fortune. I looked at the door where my father had been dragged out like a criminal. "But being alone is quiet," I said. "Being alone is safe." I looked my mother in the eye. "And honestly, I would rather be alone in the dark than live in a mansion with cannibals who eat their own young." I turned to Elias Thorne. "I am ready to go." Thorne nodded, a look of genuine respect on his face. He picked up his briefcase. We walked out of the conference room, leaving my mother standing in the center of the wreckage she had helped create. She called my name once, a desperate, wailing sound, but I did not stop. I did not turn around. I walked straight to the elevator, and as the doors slid shut, cutting off the view of my former family, I took the first deep, clean breath of my new life. The elevator ride down from the 32nd floor was the longest and quietest journey of my life. The doors had slid shut on a tableau of absolute destruction my father pinned against a wall, my sister weeping over her bankrupt future, and my mother standing in the ruins of her manipulation but inside the steel car. The air was still and sanitized. Elias Thorne stood next to me, checking his watch. He did not say a word. He did not offer a platitude about how things would get better or how I had done the right thing. He offered me the dignity of silence, allowing my heart rate to decelerate from a gallop to a steady rhythmic thud. When the doors opened to the lobby, the noise of the outside world rushed in to meet us. The lobby was bustling with couriers, businessmen, and tourists, all oblivious to the tragedy that had just played out upstairs. We walked across the marble floor, our footsteps clicking in unison. I felt a strange sensation of weightlessness. For 30 years, I had walked with the invisible burden of my family's expectations, their debts, and their emotional instability strapped to my back. Now, I was walking only for myself. We pushed through the revolving glass doors and stepped onto the sidewalk. The storm had broken. The violent nor'easter that had battered the city for 2 days had retreated, leaving behind a sky that was a bruised, brilliant blue. The air was biting cold, the kind of sharp, clean cold that fills your lungs and wakes up every nerve ending in your body. It smelled of wet concrete, exhaust fumes, and possibilities. Thorne stopped near the curb and turned to face me. He reached into his briefcase one last time and pulled out a thick envelope. "The transfer has already been initiated," Thorne said. "The settlement funds have been moved from the holding account to the new trust structure we discussed. Your father cannot touch a dime. Bianca cannot touch a dime. It is entirely yours." I took the envelope. It felt heavy, but not like a burden. It felt like a weapon I was finally holstering because the war was over. "And the other matter?" I asked. "The incorporation papers for the foundation," Thorne said, handing me a silver pen. "We just need your signature to finalize the charter. The Leo Norwood Legal Defense Fund, dedicated to providing high-end legal representation for victims of financial abuse and coercive control within families." I placed the folder on top of a concrete planter outside the building. I looked at the name of the fund, Leo Norwood, my son. His life had been short, and his death had been used as a bargaining chip by the people who should have loved him. But now, his name would be a shield for others. His legacy would not be a party house in a gated community. It would be freedom for people like me who thought they had no way out. I signed my name. The ink flowed black and permanent. "Done," I said, handing the pen back to Thorne. "You are a formidable woman, Freya," Thorne said. It was not a compliment paid to a client. It was an observation from one predator to another. "If you ever decide to change careers, give me a call. I could use someone with your instinct for the jugular." "I think I am done with courts for a while," I said. Thorne nodded. He looked past my shoulder, down the avenue. "Well," he said, buttoning his coat, "it looks like my part is finished, and the state's part is just beginning." I turned to look where he was looking. A police cruiser was pulling up to the curb, its lights flashing silently against the daylight. It did not use a siren. It did not need to. 2 officers stepped out, adjusting their belts, and walked with purpose toward the revolving doors of the Zenith Tower. They were not rushing. They knew their targets were not going anywhere. I knew what was happening. Thorne had kept his promise. The digital evidence of the forgery and the fraud had reached the district attorney. The officers were going upstairs to take statements, and likely, to make arrests. My father's assault on me would just be the cherry on top of a very long list of charges. A part of me, the old Freya, the scapegoat, the peacekeeper, wanted to turn around. She wanted to run back into the lobby, to intervene, to beg the officers to be gentle, to fix the mess one last time. But the woman standing on the sidewalk was not that person anymore. That person had died in the rain at Stonehaven Cemetery alongside her son. I watched the officers disappear into the building. I felt nothing, no joy, no malice, no guilt, just a profound, quiet neutrality. It was the law of physics finally correcting itself. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. They had sown the wind, and now they were reaping the whirlwind. "Are you staying to watch?" Thorne asked. "No," I said. "I have already seen enough." Thorne tipped his head slightly. "Good luck, Freya." He turned and walked toward a waiting black sedan, disappearing into the city that he owned. I stood alone on the corner. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. It was buzzing again. Another call from my mother, or perhaps Bianca realizing that the police were at the door. I did not answer. I went into the settings. I changed my number to the new one I had purchased yesterday. Then, I went to my social media accounts. I did not just block them. I deactivated everything. I deleted the email app from my phone, one by one. I severed the digital tendrils that connected me to the Norwood family. With every tap of my finger, I felt the silence around me grow larger, more protective. I was cutting the anchor chain. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, where it rested against the laminated photograph of Leo I always carried. I patted the pocket, feeling the outline of his smiling face. "We did it, baby," I whispered. "We are safe." I turned away from the glass tower. I stepped into the flow of pedestrians moving down the avenue. The crowd swallowed me instantly. To the people brushing past me, I was nobody. I was just a woman in a black coat walking through New York City. They did not know I was a millionaire. They did not know I had just dismantled a dynasty of narcissists. They did not know I was carrying the ghost of a 7-year-old boy. I walked for 10 blocks. I let the cold wind scour my face. I watched the steam rising from subway grates and the yellow taxis weaving through traffic. The world was loud, chaotic, and utterly indifferent to my existence, and I found it beautiful. I stopped in front of a shop window. It was a bookstore, filled with antique maps and leather-bound volumes, the kind of things I used to restore with such care. I looked at my reflection in the glass. For years, when I looked in the mirror, I saw a victim. I saw a woman who was tired, a woman who was apologetic, a woman who took up too much space. I saw the disappointment my parents claimed I was, but the woman staring back at me now was a stranger, Her shoulders were back, her chin was high, her eyes were not red from crying, they were clear and sharp. She looked dangerous. She looked unbreakable. I watched as the corners of her mouth twitched upward. It was not a polite smile. It was not a smile for a camera or a family photo. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated survival. I was 31 years old. I had lost my son, but I had found myself. I turned away from the window, turning my back on the reflection, on the past, on the family rotting in a conference room 10 blocks behind me. The light was green. The city was waiting. I stepped off the curb and walked into the rest of my life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop a comment below and let me know your country or city. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please make sure to subscribe to Veronica Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people. Your support means the world to me.